Hello everyone, this is your educator Priyanka Thakur. I'm teaching you life sciences and I welcome you all on our YouTube channel Guru Mantra Shikshaka Granth. So today we are going to study about translation. In translation, we will be mainly focusing on the initiation of translation in this particular video. So we will see the translation in eukaryote as well as prokaryotes. We will see how the pre-initiation complex will form, what kind of factors will be playing what kind of roles. So let's start with the lecture now. Translation. What exactly is translation? During translation, proteins are synthesized. We know about central dogma and we have already covered replication, transcription, and now we are covering translation. In translation, ribosomes synthesize polypeptide chains from mRNA template molecules. See, ribosome will synthesize polypeptide chains. We know that proteins are formed of amino acids and a peptide bond is present in between two amino acids. So there will be the formation of polypeptide chain during translation. In eukaryotes, this translation may occur in the cytoplasm of the cell. It actually occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell where you can see the ribosomes which may be located either freely or may be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, while in prokaryotes which have no nucleus, they possess the processes, these both the processes, transcription and translation occurs in the cytoplasm. If we talk about translational machinery, then I have already taught you this translational machinery in my previous lecture. I know many of you are just coming to this lecture only and not have seen my previous videos. So you can check out in the playlist. There you will see the RNA types. So I have taught the translation machinery there. So there are four components in the translation machinery. Actually, four main components. There are many components, but four components are the important one. mRNAs, tRNAs, amino acyl tRNA synthetases, and the ribosome. The ribosome is formed of protein plus rRNA, or I can say rRNA plus proteins. So I have already covered mRNAs, tRNAs, and rRNAs. Okay. So today I will start only from charging of tRNA. Before the process of translation starts, there is another process prior to this, which is charging of tRNA. So during charging of tRNA, what happens? Activation of amino acid and its attachment to the tRNA. So we can say that amino acid activation is refers to the attachment of an amino acid to its transfer RNA. This is also known as amino acylation or tRNA charging. Fine. Amino acyl transferase. This is an enzyme which will bind to ATP, which will bind the ATP. Amino acyl transferase will bind the ATP to amino acid and pyrophosphate will be released. And the amino acyl tRNA synthetases, say, do not get confused, okay? Amino acyl tRNA synthetase is a type of amino acyl transferase. So, we can say amino acyl tRNA synthetase is performing both the functions, okay? It will first bind the ATP to amino acid and pyrophosphate will be released. Then this amino acyl tRNA synthetase will bind AMP, adenosine monophosphate amino acid, to tRNA. And now the tRNA is called amino acyl tRNA. Have a look at it. Amino acid plus ATP. Okay. Amino acyl tRNA synthetase will bind the ATP to amino acid and amino acyl AMP complex will be formed with the release of pyrophosphate, and then this complex will be bound to tRNA with the help of the same enzyme, and now there will be the formation of amino acyl tRNA complex and release of AMP, which will be utilized during the process. Okay, now this amino acyl tRNA is called as charged tRNA actually. Each amino acyl tRNA synthetase, each of this enzyme can recognize one particular amino acid and a compatible tRNA for this amino acid. Actually, this enzyme can recognize. I hope you have seen the structure of tRNA, so you must know about the arm of tRNA molecule and anticodon loop in it. This amino acid tRNA synthetase is very sensitive for anticodon loop and acceptor arm of the tRNA molecule. It is able to recognize anticodon loop and acceptor arm. So these synthetases, they actually link the amino acid either to the 2' hydroxyl or 3' hydroxyl group of the adenosine and the 3' terminus of tRNA, and this reaction requires energy. So you must have got confused here. So let me tell you. See, you know about tRNA molecule, and you know that at 3' end there is a sequence, conserved sequence CCA. A stands for adenosine, and adenosine it is an RNA. It is a RNA, so there might be 2' hydroxyl as well as 3' hydroxyl group. It is not a deoxyadenosine, because if it is deoxyadenosine, there won't be any 2' hydroxyl group. It is a RNA, and there will be adenosine and 2' hydroxyl group will be present. So this synthetase enzyme, amino acid tRNA synthetase enzyme, can link the amino acid either to the 2' hydroxyl group or the 3' hydroxyl group as well. So now you know where exactly amino acid get attached to the tRNA. Fine. There are two classes of this enzyme. Class 1, which will attach an amino acid to 2' hydroxyl, and class 2, which will attach the amino acid to 3' hydroxyl. Okay. So whenever tRNA is having an amino acid, it is called as charged tRNA. tRNA with no amino acid is called uncharged tRNA, and tRNA having an incorrect amino acid is called mischarged tRNA. Have a look here. This is amino acid. It is bound with ATP with the help of enzyme, and then amino acyl AMP complex is formed with the release of pyrophosphate. You can see ATP having 3 bonds, 2 are released now in the form of pyrophosphate, and to 1 is attached amino acyl. Okay, amino acid. And after that, in the second group here, there is the attachment of what? There is the attachment of, tell me, there is the attachment of, just tell me, tRNA. Okay, this amino acyl will be attached to mainly here in the 3' end, and then at the 5th carbon will the 5th carbon is having the phosphate group. This phosphate will get attached to the tRNA molecule. Clear? Okay, fine. You understand now? Finally, we are having the amino acyl tRNA complex with the release of AMP later. Fine. So you understand how a tRNA is charged? Clear? Okay. So what are the steps involved in protein synthesis? Very basic steps, as in replication, as in transcription, initiation, elongation, and termination. And we will be talking about initiation only in this video. See, initiation, when we say that initiation has been, that protein synthesis has been initiated, it will be initiated only when 30S, in case of prokaryotes, when 30S and 50S subunits are associated. And these subunits are associated on a ribosome binding site, and this association also required some initiation factors, and we will talk about those initiation factors later in this video. Ribosome binding site will have a Shin-Dalgarno sequence. Okay, when I taught you RNA, I told you about the sequence. Okay, so Shin-Dalgarno sequence is present in the mRNA. Okay, so a ribosome binding site has this Shin-Dalgarno sequence as well as initiating codon. This Shin-Dalgarno sequence, this is actually complementary to the rRNA 16 srRNA of 30S subunit. You know that 30S subunit have 16 srRNA. So this Shin-Dalgarno sequence is complementary to that particular RNA, and that's how 30S subunit can attach here on this Shin-Dalgarno sequence. Initiation in eukaryotes also occurs when 40S and 60S subunits are associated. We know that in 80S ribosomes there are 2 subunits, 40S and 60S. in eukaryotes, okay, there is a bit difference. In eukaryote, there is no Schindler sequence. Rather, they have a methylated cap, okay. So first, the small subunit, the Spotria subunit, it recognizes the methylated cap first, and then it recognizes the initiation codon, and thus finally the association of larger subunit and smaller subunit takes place at the initiation codon. But it will not be as simple as we are reading it now. There will be the inclusion of a number of initiation factor, and finally it will lead to the association of 60S and 40S subunits. Okay, this process of association of 60S and 40S subunits and initiation is further facilitated by helicases and Kozak sequences in case of eukaryotes. So in prokaryote you can see a Schindler sequence, and in eukaryote you will see a Kozak sequence, which is ACCAUGG, ACCAUGG. You can see opposite to the ACCAUGG, okay, a bit different, okay. So sometimes there are IRES, internal ribosomal entry sites. Okay, these are the internal specialized sequences which are present in the mRNA, mainly in the mRNA of viruses. These the 40S subunit can directly attach to this IRES, internal ribosomal entry site, and can initiate the translation. You can have the example of poliovirus. What happened in poliovirus? Poliovirus produces some proteases that cleave a cellular translation factor, initiation factor 4G, and thus it can no more bind to the initiation factor 4E, the cap initiating complex. Okay, so poliovirus produce some proteases which which can cleave the translation factor. Which one? Initiation factor 4G. This initiation factor 4G binds to the initiation factor 4E, which is a cap binding complex. When it is cleaved, it no longer will be binding to the cap binding complex. So now there is no binding to the cap. Then eukaryotic, in eukaryotic mRNA we are having a cap, okay. When complex is not able to find the cap, so now the host cell translation is shut down, but it is then diverted to the machinery of virus, which is having an IRES, and smaller subunit can directly attach to this IRES, can start the initiation of protein synthesis, and it will be synthesizing the proteins of mRNA only, and that's how virus only, and that's how virus will be able to get a control on the host machinery. It can also get a host control of host machinery even in the absence of IRES. But sometimes these factors are cleaved, so there is IRES, alternative to the virus. It is having an IRES, and this IRES allow the 40S subunit to directly attach to it, and now this protein synthesis will continue. So initiating amino acid and initiating codon. In most of the cases we see the initiating amino acid is methionine, and initiating codon is AUG. In case of eubacteria, the first amino acid is N-formyl methionine. Okay, in eubacteria you will see AUG, which will be encoding N-formyl methionine, GUG, and rarely UUG. Okay, these are the initiating codon, and which will be recognized by N-formyl methionine tRNA. AUG, GUG, UUG are initiator codon in case of eubacteria. AUG, if it is acting as initiator codon, it will be in bacteria. In eubacteria, it's eukaryote here, it will be eubacteria. If AUG, it is acting as initiator codon, then it will be encoding phenylalanine. But if it is present within the coding region, it will encode only methionine. Okay. So similarly, GUG, if it is acting as an initiator codon, it will be again encoding phenyl methionine. But if it is in the coding region, it encodes valine. Fine. So in eukaryotes, initiation codon is AUG. So now you get what is the initiation codon in case of prokaryotes. It's AUG, mostly AUG, sometimes GUG, and rarely UUG. Okay. What is initiating tRNA now? Initiating tRNA complex, it brings the methionine, it brings the amino acid to the initiation complex for the initiation of protein synthesis. Definitely we know that tRNA molecule bring the amino acid to the initiation complex, but there are structural differences in between the initiator tRNAs and other tRNAs. Fine. So, and on the basis of these structural differences, initiation factors are able to recognize these initiator tRNAs, and thus can help in the synthesis of proteins, as actually initiation of synthesis of proteins. Initiator tRNAs are mostly recognized by initiator factors, but not by elongation factors. The important determinant of initiation tRNA in bacteria are the absence of Watson-Crick base pair in between position 1 and 72. Remember, in case of bacteria, there will be no base pairing in 1 and 72 in the acceptor arm, and there will be the presence of 3 conserved consecutive guanine cytosine base pairs in the anticodon loop. You will see it in a diagram I will be showing you. Okay, so remember this thing, that in case of eubacteria, there is no base pairing in first and 72 position of acceptor arm, and there will be 3 conserved consecutive GC one after another. Okay, 3 consecutive sequences in the anticodon stem. If I talk about initiator tRNA in eukaryotes, then there will be the presence of a particular adenine 1 uracil 72 Watson-Crick base pair in the acceptor stem, as well as the nature of base pair 50-64 and a ratio 50 to 63 in the T stem. Okay, fine. There will be the base pairing, and we will see such kind of base pairing: A1 U72 50-64 51-63. Bacterial initiator tRNA is amino-acylated. We know that it is amino-acylated by methionine tRNA synthetase. This I just told you a few minutes ago that this tRNA molecule can recognize the acceptor arm as well as the anticodon. It mainly interact with the anticodon of the tRNA. Okay, so methionine of bacterial initiator tRNA is formilated. We know that methionine is formyl methionine in case of bacteria, but this methionine is formilated by methionine tRNA transformylase, and this particular enzyme mainly recognizes the absence of 172 base pair. You understand? 172 first and 72 position base pair. It is clear to you now? Methionine tRNA synthetase mainly recognizes the anticodon, and methionine tRNA transformylase will be mainly recognizing the absence of 1 to 72 base pairs. Here you see, this is the first position, this is the 72 position. There will be no base pairing. This is the conserved CCA sequence, and this is the conserved consecutive GC base pair. Actually, these are the base pair, consecutive base pairs. Is it clear? We can have the natural variants of for this GC sequence as well, like this. Okay, clear now? What will a tRNA initiator tRNA have, and how it will be differentiated from other tRNA? Is it clear to you now? What will happen in eukaryotes and what will happen in prokaryotes? You have to mainly remember the initiator tRNA of the prokaryotes. We have studied these tRNA more in detail rather than eukaryotic one. Okay. So let's talk about initiation factor now. What will they be doing? I told you that initiation starts when there is the assembly of smaller and larger subunit. But this assembly is not as easy as we can talk about it. It requires some initiation factors. There is a role of some initiation factor in case of, these are the initiation factors of prokaryote. Initiation factor 1, 2, 3. Less number of initiation factors are required to initiate translation in case of prokaryotes, and eukaryotic translation requires more number of initiation factors, and we will be talking about it also. See, initiation factor 1, which is associated with the 30S ribosomal subunit in the A site. Okay, so this initiation, I have told you about E site, P site, A site in my previous lectures. Okay, so this initiation factor 2 will associate with the 30th ribosomal subunit in the A site, and it prevents the amino acyl tRNA from entering A site. Fine, it prevents the first amino is, remember this, first amino acyl tRNA enters to P site and not to A site. Remember this thing. And who is preventing the amino acyl tRNA from entering the A site? It is initiation factor 1, which is associated with the 30S ribosomal subunit. Okay, it can also modulate initiation factor binding to the ribosome by increasing its affinity. Okay, it will increase, initiation factor 1 can increase the affinity of initiation factor 2 so that it can bind to the ribosome, and it also prevent the 50S subunit from binding and stopping the formation of 70S subunit. It is doing pretty good job. Okay, initiation factor 2, remember, it is an essential GTP GDP binding protein whose main recognized function is to interact specifically with the initiator phenylmethionine tRNA and to position it correctly to the ribosomal P site. Now you understand that at A site, initiation factor will be preventing the amino acyl tRNA from entering the A site, while initiation factor 2, it interact specifically with that particular tRNA and place it to the P site. Okay, place it correctly on the P site. Initiation factor 3, it also serve many functions. It also bind to the smaller subunit. Okay, and it is it keeping it available for initiation by blocking 50S subunit binding before 30S pre-initiation complex, forming and increasing the accuracy of initiator tRNA selection, monitoring codon-anticodon interactions. So, initiation factor 3 will serve many functions. It will bind to small subunit, okay, and it will keep it available for initiation, but still it will be blocking the 50S subunit binding before the formation of 30S pre-initiation complex. So, initiation factor 3 will not allow the 50S subunit to bind with 30S subunit before the formation of 30S pre-initiation complex, and other than this, it will be increasing the accuracy of initiator tRNA selection, which initiator tRNA should be selected, and it also monitors the codon-anticodon interactions. Fine. So these are the steps involved. In first step, mRNA will bind to the 30S subunit and it will be stimulated by initiator factor 3. This initiator factor 3 will be selecting which tRNA is good, and initiator tRNA, it will enter the partial site. It will be placed onto the partial site by initiation factor 2. We know that. And larger subunit will then join the complex and partial tRNA binding set will be converted into the intact P and A site. And now amino acyl tRNA enters the A site. It means now it is allowed for amino acyl tRNA to enter the A site. Let's check it out here. This is 30S subunit and initiation factor 2, 3, and then initiator factor 2 will bring the tRNA molecule, initiator tRNA molecule, and place it correctly on the partial P site, and soon after the 50S subunit get attached to the 30S subunit, and initiator factor 1 is helping in this. And finally, the initiation complex is now complete. There is a P site, there is a E site, and this is a A site on which a new amino acyl tRNA can bind. Okay, clear now? Let's talk about steps involved in initiation of eukaryotes. Now here you may get confused with the initiation factor. Write down each and every initiation factor. In next lecture I will be providing you with a chart. Okay. initiation factor 2 and 3. Just like initiation factor, here you have to write down E in case of eukaryote. It represent initiation factor of eukaryotes, a eukaryotic initiation factor. You just studied that initiation factor 2 and 3 binds with smaller subunit, and but they are performing their respective functions. Initiator factor 2 also binds with the tRNA. It brings the tRNA and allow it to bind on the P site on the ribosome. Okay. So initiator factor 2, they will bind to the 40S ribosomal subunit. Initiator factor 2, it is a GTP binding protein, and GTP, when it is in GTP bound state, it binds to tRNA, and now it is called ternary complex. Initiator factor 2 in GTP bound state bound to tRNA, and this is we call ternary complex. Then this ternary complex bind to initiator factor 3, and there will be the formation of 43 initiation complex. It means tRNA plus eukaryotic initiation factor 2 and factor 3, and there is the formation of 43 initiation complex. But this complex is independent of the presence of mRNA. There is no need of mRNA yet. Okay, so initiation factor 4F will be responsible, which will bind this complex to the mRNA. See, initiator for eukaryotic initiator for F binds to mRNA. Okay, there will be entry of one factor, then other, and then other. Okay, so this 4F is actually a heterotrimer of eukaryotic initiation factor 4G, eukaryotic initiation factor 4E, and 4A. And you have read the function of 4G and 4E. 4G, it links the different components of initiation complex, and 4E, it is a cap binding protein which binds to 5' cap. And you remember I told you that 4G got cleaved and it won't be able to bind to the 4E, which is actually the cap binding protein. So it no longer, the initiation complex can no longer bind to the 5' cap. Okay, so remember this now, that 4G, it link all the components of the initiation complex. 4E is a cap binding protein and bind the 5' end. And initiation factor 4A is a helicase which will unwind the mRNA at 5' and will open the secondary structure. Okay. Initiation factor 4B is required. Initiation factor 4B is required for the activity of 4A. If it has to act as helicase, it will require 4B. So this initiation factor 4B will join initiation factor 4A and mRNA complex, which will stimulate the mRNA helicase activity of initiation factor 4A. So now you remember initiation factor 2, 3, tRNA and 43 S complex, initiation complex is formed. And then comes the initiation factor 4F. And then comes the initiation factor 4B. Initiation factor 4B, mRNA, 4B, 4F. Okay, these now joins 43S pre-initiation complex. We say that 4F can bind to mRNA, and 4B is required for the activity of initiation factor 4A. So all these are combined. Now they will join with each other. Okay, and poly A tail can also interact with the initiation factor 4G with the help of poly A binding proteins, and it suggests that there is somewhat circular organization of mRNA during the translation. I hope it is now function of each elongation factor, initiation factor is clear to you now. Now see. Now this pre-initiation complex will start scanning the mRNA with the help of initiation factor 1 F1, or you can say initiation factor F1A. And finally they will encounter AUG. When they encounter AUG, small subunit stops and it forms a 40S complex. Fine. And then initiation factor F5 or initiation factor FA joins this complex. It is actually a GTPase activating protein, and we know that initiation factor F2 is having a GTP activity. Now it will cause the hydrolysis of GTP from initiation factor F2, and there will be the release of initiation factor F2 and F3, which are inhibiting the initial 60S to join the complex. Okay, now these has been released, and see initiation factor F5b will be helping 60S subunit to join the complex. Finally, our initiating complex is ready to synthesize the protein, but now comes the function of elongation factors, and we will talk about elongation factor later in the next video. But let's also know about what happened to the initiation factor in GDP bound state. It will soon be converted into the GTP bound state by initiation factor 2b, so that it can further get involved in other initiations. So AF2B is a guanine nucleotide exchange factor. That's all about initiation. I hope you have understood it so well. Thank you. Stay safe. Take care.